Hello BookTube, welcome or welcome back to Read Becca for my chatty catch up on my currently reading, what we're looking forward to reading, and things I've recently read. So first off, thank you to everyone for your kind comments and support about my dog passing away. Obviously it's still difficult. I'm still having, kind of waves of emotion, but I'm mostly fine. Obviously it's always too soon, but he lived a very long and well-loved life, and I've been through his health increasingly ailing over the past year, so I was as prepared as I could be for this situation. So just being kind to myself the past couple of weeks and giving myself a little break has really helped. And I guess on that topic regarding reading, it did impact my reading quite a bit. So I pretty much didn't pick up a book for 4 or 5 days in the kind of overlapping time before and after, which is very unusual for me. If you've been around, I'm always reading. So I've been spending a lot less time reading. Definitely a lot of time when I try to start reading, I can't focus. So yeah, it is really impacting my reading. I did still read a good amount, even with the break in not reading. We had a 3-day weekend in the US last weekend, and so I read a couple small things and some short fiction since then. So actually I will put that out there to you all. I had in mind previously, before all of this, that I did want to really kind of amp up my short fiction reading this year, and I put a couple collections on my TBR for this year. So that is in progress, I think, and I'm trying to figure out how to wrap that up, how you all want me to wrap up short fiction, or if you do. My feeling right now is to go with like monthly, perhaps, videos wrapping up all the short fiction I've read, and that sort of makes sense, I think, based on the volume I intend to be reading. And so I could see doing that, or maybe even a quarterly short fiction wrap up if you want to see it that way. I can put it into these videos, but my feeling is they're already probably longer than most people really want. So if we add on, a short story or two every week, it's going to make it immensely longer. Yeah, so let me know how you feel about those options, or if you have other ideas how I should wrap up short fiction. So onward to the actual books. So firstly, I had one in mind that I wanted to read this month if I got through my TBR. And I'm not through my TBR yet, but it was one of those, like, the audiobook was available immediately. I had been thinking about it and it sounded so cozy. I was like, I'm just gonna go for it. And so I picked up the audio of A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers, and I started a new game of Stardew Valley. And so I just sat there and listened to the audiobook and played Stardew Valley. And then when it was done, I didn't really want to start a new audiobook, so I just didn't listen to an audiobook while I was playing, and I played some more. So I've played a ton of Stardew Valley this week. But it was perfectly cozy and wonderful. So this is a very calm, mundane series. It's sci-fi, but it's kind of a hopeful future. So maybe kind of like solar punk, hope punk type genre. And we're in this world where, like, so much has happened to separate humanity and animals and robots, because humans sort of realized the robots were sentient, and they went their separate ways. They let the robots go off and live their own lives. And so the robots have been off living in the woods. As well, the humans have decided to respect nature and let it kind of rewild everything outside of the villages where the humans are living. So Moscap is the robot, and Dex is the human monk, who is, in the first book, setting off to kind of discover themselves in the woods, in the woods where humans haven't really been, and they're just really questioning who they are as a person. And so in their journey through the woods, they run into a robot who is coming to see what humans want, because they have never really interacted with humans. And so in the first book, we are very much following Dex being a fish out of water and not really having a sense of stability in their life. And then in this story, we're flipping that. And so the duo are coming into villages and towns as they're heading for the city to fulfill Moscap's mission. And as they're going along, really we're having Moscap not knowing what to do, being completely in a sense of curiosity and wonder about these people that they're meeting. So it's incredibly mundane. They're just doing day-to-day things, kind of meeting these people and staying with them and finding their way through these human villages as they go and trying to expose and introduce people to Moscap. I love that Dex is uniquely skilled for this role, and I think does come to find kind of a sense of belonging because of that. Previously, Dex had been a tea monk, and so they sort of had this sense of empathy and ability to communicate with people really well that is serving them in this story where they're having to smooth the path for Moscap, this strange robot, to be introduced well to people. So yeah, I think that is just a beautiful sense of turning the story. I just love this. It's a quiet, peaceful novel, and there's so much about it that is emotional and emotion driven without being dramatic. I think one of my best moments of this was just them like going and hang out with someone as they're fishing, and Moscap not really understanding what fishing was and having, again, a sense of wonder about it and the choices and the ways that these people are surviving. So loved everything about it. I think this wasn't as strong as the first for me in terms of my personal connection. Like Dex's story in the first is a real draw. so this one didn't have that as much, but I still found it so charming and just wonderful and perfectly hit the spot of what I needed at the moment. Then I read a book that has been really sweeping the translated fiction booktubes, and that is Diary of a Void by Emmy Yagi and translated by David Boyd and Lucy North. This is a very mundane book, so I don't know who to recommend it to. Maybe if you liked Convenience Store Woman but are okay with even less plot, this would be a good book for you. I loved everything about it, so this was a real win for me. This was maybe feminist mundane fiction, I would say. So yeah, this is following Shibata, who is a woman in her mid-30s, and she has just started a new job because her previous job, she had to leave because she was being sexually harassed. At her new job, everyone seems very nice, and she seems to like her job, but she finds increasingly that as the only woman there, people expect her to take care of things and will bother her a little bit about it if she doesn't. So things like cleaning up the tables after a meeting, or doing coffee making duties, like things like that, all this minor little work that she's required to put in that's not actually part of her job. So she decides one day, well, I'm going to fake a pregnancy. So it's a fake pregnancy story. And Shibata is, initially just sort of knee-jerk frustrated about this fact of people expecting this of her. And they clearly are capable of doing these things, but they just force them on her. And as this goes along, her fake pregnancy is something that everyone in the office kind of gets behind, and they understand her refusing to do these menial tasks that they kind of tasked her with because of it. They start encouraging her to be better, to take better care of herself. They really support her in everything about this pregnancy. At one point, a guy that sits near her does get a little over involved, and that kind of goes on as the pregnancy progresses or doesn't progress. So he feels a sort of responsibility for her. So as things are progressing, my interpretation, I don't think this is ever, spelled out on the page entirely. This is a very subtle book, so you're needing to pick up on the nuances. For me, I recognize that as things are going along, she has moved from one form of sexual harassment, outright a sexism, to a soft sexism where people are expecting emotional labor of her that isn't really her job, to another form of sexism, to benevolent sexism, where these people are putting upon her all these expectations about her pregnancy, what she has to do for another person. They're not encouraging her to take better care of herself for herself. They're doing it because she has a duty to someone else that they perceive. And so I thought that was a really powerful message that comes across in this book, that she's experiencing sexism at each of these phases in these jobs. And, unfortunately, she doesn't really ever overcome this sexist perception of her. At a certain point, Shibata is at, I think, a holiday party, and she's having a conversation with the men there, who are all kind of surprised by her pregnancy, and they all have been happy for her as far as it's gone. And they talk about how it's so unexpected that she got pregnant, because she never really talked about having a husband or partner, as if she couldn't just, have a one-night stand and get pregnant, right? But the way they talk about it, for me, they seem to see her as not a complete person, because she doesn't have an association with a man. And so they couldn't fathom her having an independent, complete life outside of her referencing a partner to them. So I think there were just a lot of really deeper themes there. There are only a couple women who really are supportive of her as a person, as an individual. Certain pregnant women really talk about the difficulties of having a pregnancy, of then having kids. These women who have had children before, and she meets. There's a one point with a friend of hers, and this is actually before. This is in a kind of a flashback to her life prior, and her being on this vacation that she decided to go on. And she's looking at buying an item to take back home with her as a memento of the trip. And she's kind of saying, well, I can't get it because I live by myself and it's really expensive, so I don't really think I should. And her friend says, I don't know what expensive is for you, or why it matters if you live on your own or not, but I think you should make your place look the way you want before you forget what that is. So I think there were moments like that peppered through, but overall the message from everyone else is about her driving towards meeting someone else's needs rather than her own. And early in the pregnancy, she does kind of make those choices about caring for herself that appear initially to be self-fulfilling, but all the drivers behind that, again, are about this pregnancy and caring for someone else. So people are constantly hammering home that as the baby's needs go first. So it was a really fascinating novel. It gave me a lot to think about in such a tiny package, and the writing was really very simple to read. I think it had a really similar style in terms of the kind of lightness to reading it as No Such Thing as an Easy Job that I read last year. So I think that is a similar, it maybe is a cross between Convenience Store Woman and No Such Thing as an Easy Job, maybe. That's a good comparison. I really enjoyed this. I think there's one thing that was maybe a negative in the execution, that at the very beginning, she right away says, here's how I got fake pregnant, basically. And does so in a just really rapid summary form, and then gives us, like 20 pages of story of the present time of her living as this pregnant woman at work. And then it goes and flashes back to explaining again in real depth how she came to that decision and the backstory of everything in a lot more depth. So it feels a little repetitive. I think it could have skipped that first time and just delivered the actual her living as pregnant, and then here's how it happened 20 pages later. So I think that was maybe something that could have been edited, but it wasn't really clunky or a major problem for this. I think this was a stunning book. I really loved it. Then I had a potentially less fantastic one. I read They Knew How the Culture of Conspiracy Keeps America Complacent by Sarah Kendzior. This was one of the books I mentioned previously that I had a couple of nonfiction November holds for newish nonfiction releases that never came in November, so I just kept waiting for them to come in. They finally came in December and I couldn't get to them, so I finally started them both this month. So this one was good, but not really what I was hoping for. It feels like a podcast. And I didn't know that the author had a podcast, but then she mentions it multiple times in the book. So it was obvious, like, that made sense. The topic of this, obviously, is conspiracy. I thought it was going to be much more about conspiracy theory and the aspect of modern conspiracy theories. It's not really that. It is about her. She's discussing the fact that there are so many conspiracies. I would say corruption is probably the right word for my liking rather than conspiracy, because she's just giving a litany of examples of how politics and wealth is corrupted and no one is held accountable, or justice is not served against those who are wealthy and powerful. And so we do get a litany of examples of that. There is some discussion of actual conspiracy theories. And I think for me, the shining element of this is that this includes a very coherent and simple, understandable description of QAnon and how that formed, like the beginning steps, what it came out of, and what it actually is. Because you ask someone to explain that to you, it's very convoluted, and she makes it sound very straightforward and simple in this book. So I think that's the number one takeaway for me for this. However, for my liking, I don't feel like this really makes a strong case for anything. She takes the stance of kind of throwing a lot of information at us. That's why it kind of feels podcasty, where there's just a litany of information. So it sounds really solid, but there's not anything backing up in terms of what is being shared in the text. It's just claim after claim after claim. And then some sort of memoir moments where she's sharing anecdotes about her life to fill in and make us really attached to her. It didn't need that. I really thought the sort of personal anecdotes made no sense in this, other than her, kind of wanting to talk about things going on in St. Louis. So that was fine, but unnecessary. It wasn't convincing, though, in terms of if I were someone who disagreed with this, there's no way this would convince me of anything, because it's not building up that case from the ground up. It feels like, at points, she literally will just say, X is bad. And if you're trying to convince someone that X is bad, you can't do that. You have to say, X is bad because of these reasons, and here's how we know that, and here's who studied that. And I don't feel like we get any of that buildup. It's just a litany of information. And she says things with a sureness that I don't think should be there in journalism. I think it feels very, very biased. Now, because I am someone who is in agreement with her, I still liked this. I'm someone who's also fairly informed on the topics covered by this, so I don't think there was anything too surprising for me. And if I were less informed, I might be more dubious about the information, because she did really provide a lot of information showing her work, Yeah, so I feel very mixed on this one, because as someone who agrees with her, who I feel confident based on, the things I know already, that her research is solid, but I don't feel like she showed that throughout the course of the book, or really made it solid to the reader. So yeah, I feel very mixed. I don't think this would convince anyone, but I think it is presented in a very well thought out and concise and readable fashion. So yes. However, probably the biggest problem with this that I had, beyond it not convincing someone who is not in agreement, the epilogue was just bonkers. I don't know what happened there, but I had to listen to the epilogue multiple times, because it was just a lot of rambling and her making claims that really didn't have any basis, or her saying what people need to do. And these are, very sociological kind of acts. And so people will have different opinions about how that will work out. But she seems completely certain and is very determined that her opinion is right. yeah, it was a very odd epilogue. So overall, I would say it was an okay book, because I agree with it, and I probably enjoyed listening to it on audio. So yeah. Then we have all the stuff that's in progress. Finally, we've got Upside Down, Anne of Manhattan by Brina Starler. We've got The Word for World is Forest by Ursula K. LeGuin. We've got The Best of World SF Volume 2, very shiny. And I need to start this, my bestseller, Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen, because I don't want to get behind on my bestseller project already in the first month. So yeah, that is all the reading stuff. So obviously, because I have not been reading as much, I've been doing a lot of other stuff, of watching TV and movies. I think I've watched probably as many movies this past 2 weeks as I did in the previous year. I watched a couple shows, so I caught up on, or not caught up, I watched Bob's Burgers season 9. I have been very slowly and intermittently trying to watch through all of Bob's Burgers. So I finally got started with that, I think in December, and picked up in season 8 and 9. So I'm into season 10 now. So I think I'm over halfway through this series now. So hopefully, I think I still have like 100 episodes left, but I'm glad I'm progressing again. I watched Wednesday, the series on Netflix, and I really enjoyed that first season. I hope they don't cancel it. I think it was fantastic. The cast was so good. Ricky Lindholm, really loved her, and I can't think of her name. The lady who plays Brienne of Tarth, so good, so good. Yeah, the whole cast though was amazing. The vibe and atmosphere, really phenomenal, really good. What else? I watched season 2 of Travels with My Father with Jack Whitehall. I thought I was a season behind, and I looked, and there's like 5 seasons now. So I watched the first season and really enjoyed it. Jack Whitehall can be kind of annoying. He definitely goes over the top with his bothering people, but he and his father's dynamic is so great, and clearly, you know, obviously his father is probably not really that grumpy and stick in the mud over all this stuff, considering he's going along with everything. But yeah, their dynamic is wonderful, and I just enjoy that show so much. So I finished watching season 2, I think, all in one day, and I'm really looking forward to continue on with season 3. And then movies wise, oh my gosh, so really like top-notch movie. I loved The Pale Blue Eye. It's based on a book. I didn't know that until after I watched it, but yes, I may think about picking up the book. But it's Christian Bale as kind of this curmudgeonly, retired sort of investigator who gets tapped to investigate this murder of a young soldier. And this is historical. And so this is also following him befriending Edgar Allan Poe, who is a young soldier who kind of helps him out and gets information about the death and like what was going on in this person's life as a soldier. So I loved the Poe performance. I can't remember the guy's name, but it's the guy who played Dudley Dursley. He's been in several big Netflix movies like The Devil All the Time. He was the preacher in that. He's been in a couple of big Netflix movies. He's a phenomenal actor, like really good actor, but his portrayal of Edgar Allan Poe is so good. Like he nailed it, really. Yeah, so I loved that. It's a very slow film. It's weird. Gillian Anderson as well, she's in it. It's this really quirky, proper, wealthy wife, and yeah, she gives kind of the show stealing performance as well. So yeah, I just really enjoyed it. What else did I watch? Matilda. I watched Matilda the Musical. Oh my gosh, it was so good. So I love Tim Minchin. He wrote the musical, and he's a musical comedian kind of and musician. Yeah, really enjoyed the musical. I've never seen it as a musical proper, so watching it as a movie was really wonderful too. I think the girl that played Matilda was so adorable. She was really perfect. So I just really liked it. I also watched Not Okay. That one's on Hulu. And I'm not sure how I feel about it because I think it was a really well done film. I think it has a really clear message. So it's a social media type film about this girl who there's a, I think, not real attack in Paris, and she has been faking that she's gone on a trip to Paris because she's so determined to like get noticed. And so she then ends up doing this whole faked thing where she was there at this terrorist attack and gets all this sympathy and joins a support group and like all of that, and then it starts a social media frenzy basically. And then when it finally comes out that she wasn't really there, there's a lot of backlash. So that's not the message though. Like the message is her being this well-off white girl who doesn't really have any trauma, and she, you know, at points early in the movie actually says, oh yeah, I have it so hard because I don't have any trauma. Like, oh yeah, not good. So the point of the movie is very much that. So I don't know how I feel about the movie completely centering this white woman to tell this story. It feels like it should have been, like there should have been a shift. Like it should have been a jarring shift at the middle to a character of color or somebody that is like living through an actual difficult situation. And it kind of does that. Like we do get a secondary character that we're shown has real trauma, but I really wish that had been like a complete change in perspective to that person would have been really a lot better. So yeah, mixed on that one, but I think it was a well executed, you know, well performed film. So what else? Random stuff from my life, I guess we'll talk about a couple things. So exciting news from yesterday. I went to the orthodontist. I have much heavier bands now on my teeth. So that is not exciting. The exciting news is that I will have the bars off of the upper teeth in probably April if things stay on track. So that's really exciting. And then I will have to start doing aligners to straighten, because that's just to pull everything back so that I have room and we can fix the bite. And then we start actually aligning everything. I got my Invisalign for the bottom for up through April, and it's crazy how straight it is. Like it's very exciting because I've never had straight teeth. So like just looking at that and seeing like they've already made immense progress at this point. So for me, like the April Invisalign tray looks like as straight as I would have ever hoped for, basically. And then I've still got several months of that afterward, and then going back to do refinements after that. So yeah, I still have a long process ahead of me, and obviously haven't even started on the upper teeth, but like, wow, like the lowers were the most kind of noticeably, visibly bad. And so they're going to be basically fixed within 6 months of having started this all. So I'm so excited about that. Really, really cool. The other thing that I was going to share for my week is just like a happy story from the library, because the library is the best place. This was so random. I wasn't even going to go in, and I was like, I'll just go in and look kind of situation, because I needed to return some books and I was just going to drop them off. But no, I wanted to look at the new stuff at least. So I'm standing there looking at new stuff, and the librarian comes up with somebody and they're looking for a book and they can't find it. And the librarian's like, well, I'm going to have to go look it up if you don't know the title. And I heard them mention the name was Yang, and I was like, are you looking for the new Ed Yang? And I can't even think of the title right now, but it's the really popular one that's going around with the monkey on the cover. And so I was like, oh yeah, it's right over here in the bestsellers, and because I had just been looking there. And the guy was like, wow, how did you do that, you know? And I was like, yeah, I just know every book really. And so we got to talking, and it was, I think, him and his wife there. And so we're chatting about book stuff, and like book-based movie, and they didn't know anything about the book, and I was like, oh yeah, I've read that, and there's other books about it, like a bunch of random stuff, and talking about events at the library. They were gonna do some stuff, and like randomly he's like, my daughter wrote a book, are you interested in knowing what it is? And I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'm always looking for new books. And he's like, yeah, it's titled Spineless. And I was like, the jellyfish book? And he clearly, like, the look on his face was so funny, because he clearly did not expect me to have any clue what this book was. Like, he was in shock, I think, that I had heard of the book and knew exactly what it was about. And I was like, yeah, I told you, I know every book, really. Like, I've heard good reviews. I think Britta Bowler maybe reviewed that one. Yeah, it's a nonfiction book about jellyfish. And so he started telling me, about his daughter who lives in Texas and studies jellyfish. And I was like, wow, that is so cool. Like, it's such a small world in the bookish world. And like, there's so much great, joyful things to discuss about books. So yeah, it was just like a great moment in time at the library for me, that moment. So yeah, we hung out and chatted for a little while, and for no apparent reason, until they had to go, and he got his book because I found it for him. So yeah, it was really just a happy moment. So in terms of recommendations for more happy moments, I have a bunch of recs since I was away for a bit. So number one is a wonderful author interview with Jessica Johns, I believe, who is a new author of Bad Cree, this indigenous horror novel that is coming out. And I'm on the bubble of whether I want to read it, because I don't read a ton of horror, but I was fascinated to hear her talk about it. So I will link that interview, or it's a discussion. So that's kind of the format that this bookshop, it's an indie bookshop in my area, they usually have. So it's an online interview, and that discussion is between her and actually Alicia Elliott, who wrote, I think, A Mind Spread Out on the Ground, which is another one I'm really interested to pick up, actually, and is also another indigenous author. So really interesting chat, really great discussion. So highly recommend you check that out. Other interesting things this week, Rachel Morrow, who is a booktuber, author-tuber combo channel, she did a kind of reaction to the National Jewish Book Award list. And many books I have not heard of. A few I have. There were some popular fiction, but many of their categories are topics that I would be interested in, that I just wouldn't have thought to actually check for that sort of book award. So I will definitely be checking out past years to see if there are more books like that I would be interested in, because yeah, they had a lot of really interesting stuff, especially if you have an interest in religion, but it is not all that. They have, popular fiction and stuff on there too. And then the final one is just that the British Science Fiction Academy announced their very long list. So this is kind of usually the first big list that comes out for award buzz every year, and they do have a really long list. So it's kind of what to put on your radar if you haven't had it on your radar for the science fiction and fantasy awards sort of rating. So I'm going to be going through that list and kind of looking at stuff to decide what I want to read and kind of see before other awards are coming up later on in the year. And what to prioritize from 2022 releases, because I do already have a really big list of 2022 releases I wanted to get to that I don't think I'm going to get to all of them, so I need to kind of filter. Yeah, so I think we'll leave it at those 3 recs for this week. So that is it for me. It's been a long video, so thank you for sticking with me, and that's it for me this week. Thanks all so much for watching. And a daisy watering fountain. Please still going for this week. Several days off, we're picking back up, and we've got all these piles to sort out. Ugh. 15 minutes later, this chunk is now done.